If I told you I stopped eating fiber for 30 days, most people would think that's a terrible idea because most of us have been told our entire lives that we need fiber. That is extremely important. That if you have any issue with digestion, the answer is more fiber. But what if I told you that's not the full picture? And this isn't the first time I've experimented with low fiber either. The first time I went zero fiber was back in 2018, and let me tell you, at the time, I thought it was absolutely crazy. At this time, I tried the carnivore diet, and I know it sounded extreme, but honestly, I didn't expect to feel as good as I did. I've played around with different amounts of fiber over the years, high fiber, low fiber, and everything in between. And what I found might surprise you. So in this video, I want to walk you through my experience. I want to explain what fibermaxxing is, what people are claiming, and whether or not we actually need as much fiber as people say. Let's start with something that most people don't realize. Fiber is actually a non-essential nutrient. There are essential nutrients, and those are ones that we need to get from our diet that our body can't make or can only make in low amounts. And then there are essential nutrients, ones that our body either can make or doesn't need. But that doesn't mean that non-essential nutrients don't have any benefits. And that applies to fiber too. There's no deficiency disease for fiber. There's no minimum amount that you must consume to function. And that's very different to the many amino acids or types of protein that are essential. That's different than the essential fatty acids and other vitamins and minerals. So right away that should make you question, is more fiber always better? Now, where fiber does have benefits is in things like slowing digestion, helping with fullness, and blunting blood sugar spikes. These are real effects, and I'm by no means saying that I'm anti-fiber or that I don't eat fiber. But I am saying that the amount that people truly need is often overestimated, especially if you look into how those recommendations came about. A lot of the research showing benefits of higher fiber intake is based on populations eating highly processed diets. So when you add fiber into that context, of course things improve. You're adding structure to a diet that lacked it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that high fiber is optimal in every context. But we'll come back to that a little bit later. First, I want to talk about a recent trend I've been seeing: fibermaxxing. This is where people are intentionally trying to eat as much fiber as possible. People are doing things like adding psyllium husk to everything, loading meals with vegetables purely for fiber, and tracking fiber intake like it's the most important metric. The reported benefits include things like better gut health, more fullness, better blood sugar control. Some even claim it leads to weight loss. And again, there could be some truth to that. Fiber can increase fullness, it can slow digestion, it can stabilize blood sugar. But like most things, there's a trade-off. And that's where my experience comes in. When I push fiber really high, that's when my digestion is at its worst. More bloating, more discomfort, and more time in the bathroom. And this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. More fiber means more bulk, and more bulk means more frequent bowel movements, because our bodies can't actually digest fiber. It goes through our system. So more bowel movements is not necessarily a sign of better health. It just could mean that there's more to pass. On the other hand, when fiber is lower, you tend to have fewer bowel movements. Your body is absorbing more of what you're eating. There's less waste. And this is where people get confused. They think that fewer bowel movements automatically means something's wrong, but that's not always the case. More importantly is how you feel. Are you comfortable? Are you bloated? Does your digestion feel easy and predictable? For me personally, my digestion is best when my fiber intake is relatively low, usually somewhere between 10 to 15 grams, which is well below the RDA. And even on days when my fiber is closer to zero, my digestion is still good. But, and this is really important, most of my diet is whole foods. Not low fiber processed foods, but meals built around things like meat, eggs, fish, and some fruit and vegetables. Because when you reduce your reliance on fiber for fullness, what you build your meals around matters a lot more. What's more beneficial to center your meals around is high quality protein. Because, like I said before, protein is actually an essential nutrient, and a lot of people are not eating enough of it. Protein is the biggest trigger for satiety. With fiber, sometimes you get the feeling of being physically full because the fiber is literally in your system and can't be broken down. A lot of times when we're hungry, when we have cravings, it's because we're not eating enough protein. And that's actually what our body is craving. And this is why I'm such a big fan of butcher crowd. It makes it easy to have good quality meat on hand. So you can actually build meals this way without overthinking it. Because this approach only works if your food quality is good. Otherwise, you'll end up replacing one problem for another. ButcherCrowd delivers 100% grass-fed and finished beef and lamb, pasture-raised chicken and pork, and wild-caught seafood straight to your door Australia-wide. Click the link in the description box down below to get a free set of 4 steak knives plus free steak for life. Now going back to fullness, because this is one of the biggest arguments for fiber. Like I said, it can help you feel full, but this is because of the volume. It stretches your stomach. It slows digestion, which can be useful, but it's not the most effective way to stay full. Protein works on your hunger hormones, not just physically filling your stomach. It helps regulate appetite in a way that actually reduces the drive to eat, which means you're not just full, you're satisfied. And this is why I always come back to protein as the foundation of my meals. If your meals are built around enough protein, you don't need to rely on large amounts of fiber to keep you full. And if you haven't seen it, I have a whole video on 20 ways to get 30 grams of protein. It's a super quick video, and there's also a cheat sheet you can save. So I'll link that up above if you want to check it out next. And I highly recommend if protein is something you struggle to eat enough of. But that's the starting point. Once that's in place, everything else becomes easier. Now going back to Fibermaxxing and the idea that more fiber is always better. What I found is that pushing fiber as high as possible can actually cause more issues that outweigh the benefits. More bloating, more gas, more digestive discomfort, and sometimes digestion actually slows down too much. So instead of improving things, you actually end up managing your symptoms. Trust me, there was a point in time where I thought a plant-based diet was the ideal, where I was relying on beans, legumes that are very high in fiber as a protein source. And let me tell you, my digestion has never been worse. When you eat 0 to low fiber, you spend less time on the toilet. You feel less physically full. But like I said, if you're eating enough protein, you still feel satisfied and you don't have those cravings. And this is where I think a more balanced approach can come in. Because like I said, fiber does have benefits. If you're trying to control your blood sugar and you're looking for different ways to do that, making sure you have fiber at your meals, that can help. 0 fiber isn't for everyone. High fiber isn't for everyone. You should find a level that actually works for your body, rather than aiming for an arbitrary number. For me, that's on the lower end. Like I said, 10 to 15 grams, I feel pretty good. But for someone else, it might be higher. For anyone who does have a lot of digestive distress, lower might be better. 0 fiber diets are a common and very effective treatment for people with chronic constipation. Because if you don't have this bulk going through your system, there's no constipation. And constipation is usually when fiber gets pushed the hardest. That's not always the solution. Yes, if you are eating a very processed diet with a lot of fast food and junk food and you're constipated, adding fiber might help. But in a lot of cases, it actually makes things worse. But the point is, it's not as simple as more fiber equals better digestion. There are other factors. Hydration, electrolytes, meal composition, stress, medications. Certain medications slow digestion and cause constipation. And in those cases, fiber alone isn't going to fix the problem. So if you're dealing with digestive issues, it's worth looking at the bigger picture, not just defaulting to eating more fiber. Because what you might find is that by reducing fiber, your digestion improves, your bloating reduces, your meals feel more satisfying. And when you're not constantly thinking about food, that's the real goal. Not chasing numbers, not chasing trends, but finding what actually works for your body. So if you've been caught up in this idea that you need more fiber, that Fibermaxxing is something you want to try, take a step back. Simplify it. Give eating less a try and see how you feel. Because sometimes less is really more. Now I want to hear from you guys. Have you eaten a 0 fiber or a low fiber diet before? How did you find your digestion was? Let me know in the comments down below. And before you go, if you're in Australia, make sure to check out ButcherCrowd. You can pause, change, or cancel your subscription at any time, so there's no reason not to give them a try.